Guys, welcome back to my channel. I'm Rebecca and today we're actually doing a sewing tutorial. So I'm going to be showing you guys how I made this DIY halter top. So if you're interested in seeing the tutorial, make sure you keep on watching. So I am using a halter top that I already own to make the pattern. It just makes life so much easier. I will show you a hack if you don't have a halter top to use as like a baseline as well. If you don't have a halter top to work with, what you can do is try it on a fitted t-shirt and just mark out what you'd want the neckline to look like and the armhole to look like for your actual halter top, and then you can use those chalk markings or fabric marker markings to create the pattern itself. Now I'm folding my pattern paper in half and I'm folding my halter top in half as well, and then what I'm going to do is trace around the halter top onto the pattern paper so I can get that design out. What I'm going to do as well, make sure that you remember to trace the front line of the halter top as well as the back, because we're going to use both for this pattern. And once you've traced it out, you can use a French curve or a ruler. A French curve just makes sure that your lines are a bit more precise or accurate, or you get the curve just the way you want it to be. And remember to add your 1/2 inch seam allowance as well, and then you can cut it out. So once you have your pattern and you've labelled it, you can cut it out on fabric. So we're cutting 4 pieces in total because we want it to kind of have a seamless look. So there's going to be 2 front pieces and 2 back pieces. So once you've cut out those 4 pieces, what you can do is grab one of the pieces, fold it in half along with your pattern paper, and what I'm going to do is mark directly onto the fabric the front neckline that we've marked out in the beginning. And once I've marked that out, I'm going to cut it out and I'm going to use that as a template to cut out the second piece as well, because remember there's 2 front pieces, so they need to have the same neckline, and there's 2 back pieces, so they need to have the same neckline as well. So as you can see here, I've just cut out the first front piece, so I'm going to put that onto another piece that I've cut out, and I'm going to trace that neckline and I'm going to cut it out, and then we'll have our 2 front pieces and we'll have our 2 back pieces as well. So once you have cut that front neckline out, like I said, you should have 2 front pieces and 2 back pieces. And what you're going to do is lay both sides, so the front piece and the front piece, you're going to lay them together, front sides facing each other, and do the same for the back. So watching this part closely will probably give you a better description than what I can say verbally, but what I'm doing is I am pinning the sides, but we are going to sew together first. So that is the neckline, that is the armpit, and that is the crotch area. So you can see that I'm pinning those 3 places. I will point out and say we're only stitching those 3 sides. So for example, the top, the shoulder part, we're not stitching that. We're just stitching the neckline, we're stitching the armhole, and we're stitching the crotch area. And once you've done it for the front, you can do it for the back. Remember, front sides facing each other. So we're doing the same thing. We're sewing the neck hole, we're sewing the armpit, and we're sewing the crotch area, and we're pinning them first. And then finally, finally we can go over to our sewing machine and stitch those sides. So this part is really hard to explain, so I'd say look carefully if you can. I've flipped one of the pieces, now we have two pieces. I've flipped one of those pieces inside out, and what I'm going to do is put it inside the second piece I have and sew around the shoulder in a way that will make sure that the design is seamless. So the left armhole is being matched with the left armhole and the right armhole with the right armhole, and we're going to sew around it. This step was quite tricky to do on the sewing machine. If you've sewn a seamless bikini bottoms before, you've probably had this struggle. But if it's a case where the hole is too small for you to sew around it, then I would do it by hand, which is what I ended up doing. So I went around it once on the machine, and then for the bits that probably came out a bit weird looking, I went over it again by hand. So once you've stitched around those shoulders and you flip the design the right way, this is what you should be looking at. And what I'm going to do is pin down those sides that we haven't stitched yet, and that's what I'm going to sew next. So the final step is attaching the fasteners for your bodysuit. I went with snap and eye fasteners. As you can tell, don't do what I did and sew it the wrong way. Just pay attention when you're sewing it to make sure that you don't do this mistake. But once you've done that, you should be all done.
Go with the brothers.